The prison yard fell silent the moment the new inmate was singled out. He was older, calm, and didn't fit the mold of an easy target. That's all the gang leader, Elliot Lion Miller, needed to see before he smirked. "You look tired, Grandpa," Lion sneered, blocking his path. "Maybe you need a little wake-up call." The other inmates watched. Then, Lion made his move, pouring the cold, dirty contents of a water cup over the head of the new man. The older black man didn't flinch. He just stood there, eyes steady, breathing slow, letting the water drip, but his gaze never left Lion's. The expected reaction was fear or fury. The non-reaction was the first unexpected shot across the bow. No one knew it yet, but the man they were mocking wasn't just another prisoner. He was a veteran undercover police officer, Deontay Johnson, here to find the corrupted hand that was steering the prison gang from the outside. The steel doors of the penitentiary clanged shut. It was a sound that warned every man of their new reality. But when 52-year-old Deontay Johnson heard those doors close behind him, his expression didn't change. His weathered hands remained steady, his shoulders straight despite the state-issued uniform. He was here as prisoner 4181, but he was really Investigator Johnson, tasked with identifying the ghost, the corrupt cop helping the Lion Gang evade justice. The cell block was a kingdom ruled by Elliot Lion Miller. Lion, 6 feet 2 inches of pure intimidation and paranoia, controlled the block through fear and an extensive network of external support. He knew an undercover cop was coming, a warning delivered by the very mole Deontay was hunting, and Lion was testing every new inmate. Fresh meat meant fresh opportunities to assert his dominance and flush out a rat. Deontay's first night was quiet. He made his bunk with the military precision of an officer and began a quiet, patient assessment of the block. He had to be weak to lure Lion in, to play the broken older inmate to gain access to the information he needed. "My cover is my only weapon," he told himself. "My objective is my shield." Before we begin, share where you're listening from, and let us know what you think of Deontay's journey at the end. Let's dive into a tale that reminds us what really matters: integrity and justice. Hi, my beautiful family. Let's start with a blessing. Dear Lord, I ask you to surround every person watching with peace, healing, and endless love. Amen. You are not just an audience. You are my family, the reason I push through on the hardest days. For those who are new here, welcome to the family. Please subscribe, say hello in the comments, and let's grow closer together. Each story I bring is my sacrifice and devotion. When you walk away early, it feels like my heart is left unheard. Please, stay with me through the journey until the very end, to see how Investigator Deontay Johnson managed to survive 5 knife wounds and bring down an entire criminal empire and the corrupt cop who set him up. I love you always. Now let us begin. The next morning brought a fresh confrontation. Lion was waiting in the yard with his crew. Deontay approached, moving slowly, maintaining the facade of a passive, broken man. Lion blocked his path, his massive frame demanding submission. "You're disrespectful, old man," Lion growled. "You don't look me in the eye when I speak." Deontay knew he had to bait the hook, show no fear, but no aggression either. He kept his eyes steady. "I hear you," he said simply. "I just don't see anything worth bowing to." This was not defiance, this was strategy. It was a response that ensured Lion's curiosity, and his deadly focus, would remain locked squarely on the new inmate. Deontay understood that the humiliation in the yard, while painful to endure, had bought him currency. Lyon's cruelty was simply a probe, and by maintaining his silence and composure, Deontay had signaled either profound weakness or profound indifference. Lyon's suspicion was piqued, and Deontay could feel the gang leader's focus shift from casual bullying to calculated scrutiny. This was exactly where Deontay needed him. His work began in the quiet corners of the prison, the library, the industrial laundry, the few minutes allowed for yard time. He wasn't looking for manifestos or secret ledgers. He was listening for the texture of the conversations. He observed that certain members of the Lyon gang received packages or messages that passed through the outer walls too smoothly, too consistently. He noted hushed mentions of Blackie or the Wood whenever a certain prison procedure was inexplicably delayed or a transfer request mysteriously vanished. Piece by piece, Deontay began constructing a psychological profile of the mole from the outside, a profile that spoke of access to high-level police databases, a willingness to risk internal affairs, and a direct line of communication with the cell block. His internal list of police suspects, once broad, quickly narrowed to 3 names, and one of them felt cold, heavy, and correct: Officer William Blackwood. Meanwhile, 20 miles away in the cool, sterile environment of the police precinct, Officer William Blackwood felt a cold knot tightening in his stomach. He had received the anonymous, scrambled tip, a digital scream of a memo about an undercover operation launched into the penitentiary, specifically targeting the external facilitators of the Lyon gang. Blackwood, a man who had traded his badge for dirty money years ago, immediately knew the potential cost. An infiltration meant a leak, and a leak meant him. His first, panicked action was to communicate the danger. He used a burner phone and a coded message to reach his contact on the outside, who then relayed the warning into the prison. The cage has been opened. There is a new dog hunting the master. The warning hit Elliot Lyon, Miller, like a physical blow. The humiliation he'd inflicted on Deontay suddenly seemed meaningless. All he could focus on now was the chilling realization that one of the faces he saw every day was a lie. Lyon's already corrosive paranoia flared into a controlled rage. Every inmate became a suspect. He started with the ones who were too quiet, the ones who kept their heads down, the ones who behaved too perfectly, and Deontay Johnson sat right at the top of that list. Lyon began to treat the new inmate not as prey, but as a slow-moving trap. He ordered his crew to track Deontay's every move, his conversations, even his meal times. The hunt had officially begun, and the quarry, the old man who simply stood still under the stream of water, was now the center of the Lyon's universe. Deontay could feel the pressure intensifying, the hostile eyes everywhere. He had successfully put himself in the crosshairs, but now he had to survive long enough to pull the trigger on his own target before Lyon's suspicions turned into a fatal certainty. The subtle clues Deontay had gathered, the delayed maintenance reports, the specific coded phrases whispered near the loading dock, the way certain non-essential supplies arrived for the Lyon gang with suspicious regularity, coalesced around a single document. It was a transfer manifest, accidentally left open on the warden's unattended desk during a brief moment when Deontay was allowed cleaning duty in the administrative wing. The manifest wasn't the smoking gun, but a small, almost invisible detail on it was a specific, unauthorized stamp for external clearance. Deontay recognized the stamp's stylized lion emblem. It was the personal seal of the Internal Affairs Commander, a signature Officer William Blackwood had the highest level access to Mimic. The stamp confirmed it. The mole was not just one of the names on his list, it was Blackwood himself. The corruption went higher and deeper than Deontay had originally feared. He had his evidence, circumstantial but damning, and his target was now definitively confirmed. A profound sense of relief, quickly followed by a cold wave of dread, washed over Deontay. He had done his job. Now, it was time to leave. But in the world of espionage, time is an illusion, and fate often works with cruel symmetry. Just as Deontay was securing the mental proof, Officer Blackwood was running his own desperate scramble. Using his police credentials and exploiting a security loophole, Blackwood had accessed the department's list of deep cover assets currently deployed. He had to know which dog was hunting him. Cross-referencing the internal alert about the prison operation with the inmate intake records from the last week, Blackwood saw the image of the older black man. The man Lion had described as the calm, quiet one, and his heart seized. The name on the file was irrelevant. The photo matched the face of investigator Deontay Johnson, one of the best and most disciplined undercover cops the force had. At that exact, critical moment, Blackwood knew the man inside was a cop, and Deontay knew the cop outside was Blackwood. The hunter and the hunted had simultaneously identified each other. The game was over, and the prize was survival. Back in the cell block, Deontay moved with a sudden, desperate urgency, a stark contrast to his months of calculated stillness. He had a few minutes, maybe less, before Blackwood's panic would translate into a desperate, final countermove. He didn't waste time trying to contact Central Command. The lines were too slow, too compromised. Instead, he used the prearranged emergency signal, a single, non-verbal gesture visible only to his backup team during the next yard rotation. A precise, almost imperceptible shift in the positioning of his bedding. It meant target identified. Cover blown. Immediate extraction. He began hastily stuffing his few personal items into his small bag. Every sound in the block seemed amplified. The scrape of metal, the distant shouts of guards, the sickeningly close rhythm of boots marching toward his section. He knew the extraction team would move fast, but Blackwood's warning to Lion would be faster. The walls of his cell, once a secure fortress of silence and solitude, suddenly felt flimsy and porous. He was exposed, a target waiting for the inevitable retaliation. Deontay's mission was complete, but his life was now hanging on a 5-minute race against a ruthless gang leader and a terrified, desperate police mole. The signal had been sent. Deontay's fingers were flying, shoving his meager belongings into the worn bag. The sound of crinkling paper seeming to scream his cover was a lie. He was less than 60 seconds from the moment of extraction, a few precious heartbeats from freedom. Then the floor shook. It wasn't the distant thunder of the closing steel doors. It was the heavy rhythmic drumming of multiple pairs of boots, moving fast and without concern for noise discipline, coming directly toward the end of his wing. Deontay's heart hammered against his ribs, not from fear, but from the grim understanding that William Blackwood's panic had been even faster than expected. The mole had not waited for an anonymous contact. He had used his police access to directly message Lion with one word. Cop. The steel bars of Deontay's cell door rattled violently as Lion and his 2 top lieutenants slammed against them. Elliot Lion, Miller wasn't sneering now. His face was a mask of cold, murderous fury, his eyes glittering with the venom of betrayal. He was flanked by the sheer bulk of his enforcers. Didn't even make it out of the clothes you came in, did you, pig? Lion's voice was low, cutting through the sudden silence of the corridor. Blackwood sends his regards. The gang members slid a thin, sharpened shank through the food slot, expertly defeating the rusty lock in one smooth, practiced move. The door flew inward. Deontay didn't hesitate. He dropped the bag, his years of training taking over the moment his cover disintegrated. He spun, grabbing the cell's metal stool, and swung it in a vicious arc toward the first man entering. The clang of metal against bone echoed sharply, momentarily stunning the first attacker and buying Deontay a critical second. He moved with the agility of a man half his age, leveraging the cramped space to his advantage. He used his fists, his elbows, and the hard reality of the cell walls as weapons, dodging the wild, desperate swings of the gang's primitive shanks. He fought with the ferocious discipline of a cop who knew this wasn't an arrest. It was a fight to the death. He dropped one man with a precise strike to the temple. But the sheer numbers and the contained space were insurmountable. Lion roared, joining the fray, his size a blunt instrument in the small room. A sharp, searing pain exploded in Deontay's side as a shank found its mark. He stumbled back against the hard concrete. Before he could recover, a second blade tore across his abdomen. Deontay choked on a gasp, his lungs burning. He collapsed to his knees, his vision blurring. Lion stood over him, towering and triumphant, the light from the corridor casting him in stark, terrible relief. "You came in here to find a rat," Lion hissed, his voice heavy with finality, "and all you found was your grave." A final frenzy of movement. Two more blades plunged into Deontay's chest and shoulder, and then a fifth, deep into his torso. The pain was absolute, eclipsing everything else. He fell face first onto the cold, damp concrete, the blood pouring out onto the floor, his last conscious thought a desperate prayer for his extraction team to arrive. Lion kicked the limp body over and looked down at the pooling blood, the triumph settling into grim satisfaction. The threat was neutralized. The mole was safe. They turned and left the cell, pulling the door shut on the seemingly lifeless body of investigator Deontay Johnson, confident that the hunter had become the hunted, and the mission was over. The extraction team had arrived moments after the stabbing, their tactical infiltration of the prison executed with cold, precise speed. They didn't find a dead body, but they found something far worse. Investigator Deontay Johnson, bleeding out on the cell floor, the victim of 5 deep, coordinated shank wounds. He was stabilized in a chaotic rush and transferred directly to a secure medical facility outside the prison grounds. Deontay survived, thanks to his training, his resilience, and sheer luck that none of the blades had pierced a vital organ. He woke up in the stark, silent security of a hospital room that felt 1,000 miles away from the brutal noise of the cell block. His initial medical report should have gone straight to the police commissioner and vanished into the highest levels of internal affairs. Instead, Deontay himself initiated the ultimate deception. From his heavily bandaged position, speaking in hoarse whispers, he coordinated with his handler, Agent Torres. The mission had changed. It was no longer about infiltration, but execution. They leaked carefully curated, official-looking documents, a falsified death certificate, a coroner's report confirming multiple puncture wounds leading to fatal hemorrhage, and a discreet memo reporting the death of an inmate, known only as Prisoner 4181, after a gang skirmish. They sold the lie that Deontay Johnson was dead. The news spread like wildfire through the Lion Gang, both inside the prison and on the street. For Elliot Lion Miller, it was the ultimate victory. The pig was silenced, the threat was neutralized, and Blackwood was proven to be a reliable asset. For Officer William Blackwood, the news was a wave of overwhelming relief. The investigation was dead, literally. They both relaxed, settling back into their routine of crime and corruption, confident that the ghost of Investigator Johnson was gone. Deontay had bought himself 5 precious days, the length of time he would need to recover, just enough to coordinate the final strike. The hospital room became his war room. Surrounded by monitors and guarded by trusted officers, Deontay didn't waste a second. He knew exactly how Blackwood operated: arrogant, greedy, and now overly confident. Blackwood would require confirmation of the assassination and demand his payment. Deontay devised a plan that leveraged every piece of intelligence he had gathered: the time, the place, and the manner of Blackwood's typical payoffs. He and Agent Torres meticulously mapped out a remote location where Blackwood was known to meet his most trusted street contact, a top member of the Lion Gang named Whisper. The plan was daring, precise, and relied entirely on Blackwood's belief that his hunter was now 6 feet under. Deontay's survival was the secret weapon. His supposed death was the bait. He healed rapidly, pushing through the intense pain of his wounds, driven by the cold, unwavering goal of seeing Blackwood's badge stripped and Elliot Miller's fate sealed forever. The time for hiding was over. The time for the sting was rapidly approaching. The hospital bed was finally exchanged for the driver's seat of an unmarked police sedan. 5 days had passed since Deontay had been declared officially dead, and the wounds in his chest and side still throbbed with every movement, a painful, constant reminder of the failure of his cover. But the pain was fuel now. He was back in uniform, albeit under a heavy, padded vest, accompanied by Agent Torres and 2 trusted tactical officers. The sting operation was set for a dead-end maintenance road behind an abandoned industrial park, a secluded spot Blackwood favored for his discreet transactions. It was 10:45 p.m. The air was thick with fog and the smell of wet concrete. Deontay's team had wired the entire perimeter, and they sat in the shadows, waiting for the mole to take the bait. The plan was simple, relying entirely on the assumption that Blackwood was intoxicated by 2 things: the assurance of Deontay's death and the prospect of a massive payoff. The Lion Gang's highest-ranking street lieutenant, known only as Whisper, was due to arrive shortly with the payment for the elimination of the cop. At 11 p.m., a sleek black sedan, exactly matching the description Deontay had provided, pulled up. Officer William Blackwood, off-duty but looking every bit the swaggering cop, stepped out. He was alone, complacent, and radiating smug relief. A moment later, a battered pickup truck arrived, and Whisper, a heavy-set man covered in Lion Gang tattoos, emerged carrying a large, dark briefcase. The 2 men met in the pool of light cast by a broken street lamp. They exchanged terse, coded words, a final confirmation of the assassination. Then, Whisper opened the briefcase. It wasn't full of documents or drugs. It was stuffed with banded stacks of cash. The payment. Blackwood's eyes betrayed him. The greed was pure, electric, and blinding. He reached for the briefcase, savoring the moment. That was Deontay's cue. "Hands up, Blackwood." The voice didn't come from the tactical units hidden in the trees. It came from the figure stepping out of the shadows of the nearest building. A figure who was supposed to be dead. Deontay Johnson walked into the street lamp light. His face was pale beneath his dark skin, strained with exhaustion, and the outline of his vest was visible beneath his jacket. But his stance was rock solid, his service weapon drawn, and his eyes burned with the cold, controlled fury of a man who had stared into his own grave and climbed out. Blackwood froze, the briefcase dangling inches from his fingers. The blood drained from his face, leaving a sickly grey pallor. He didn't see a wounded man, he saw a ghost. You're dead, he stammered, the money forgotten. Whisper, the gang member, moved too late, fumbling for a hidden weapon. He's not dead, Officer Blackwood. Agent Torres's voice crackled from a speaker as the tactical lights snapped on, flooding the scene. He just made sure you thought he was. It's over. Deontay watched as the Sting unit swarmed the location, cuffing a stunned Whisper and pulling the briefcase full of marked cash from Blackwood's trembling hand. The evidence was irrefutable. The gang member, the payoff, the corrupt cop. Deontay had endured the prison, the knife wounds, and the fake death not for revenge, but for this single, perfect moment of justice. The hunter had finally caught the mole, ensuring the collapse of the Lion Gang's entire network. The arrest of Officer William Blackwood was the linchpin Deontay's entire operation had been waiting for. The sight of a uniformed police officer, handcuffed and kneeling beside a briefcase overflowing with illegal cash, the payment for the attempted murder of a fellow cop, was the irrefutable evidence that demolished every layer of the Lion Gang's protection. The narrative of Deontay's death had brought them the element of surprise. Blackwood's arrogance delivered the victory. The subsequent operation was swift and massive. With the former mole neutralized, the police department unleashed task forces on every known address and associate of the Lion Gang. Blackwood, desperate to save himself, turned immediately, providing enough inside information on the gang's organizational structure, financial channels, and external criminal enterprises to bring the entire network to its knees. Arrests swept across the city, clearing out drug operations, money laundering fronts, and weapons caches that had been untouchable for years. In the prison, the news hit Elliot, Lion, Miller, and his top men like a physical shockwave. Their external support, their funding, and their contacts vanished overnight. The arrests were confirmed by correctional officers who suddenly found the authority to stop looking the other way. The realization that the supposed dead inmate had orchestrated the collapse of their entire empire was a psychological blow more devastating than any physical fight. The prosecution, armed with the evidence of Blackwood's betrayal and the attempted murder of an undercover officer, moved with ruthless efficiency. Elliot Miller, already serving a 20-year sentence, faced a new, crushing wave of charges. The attempted homicide of investigator Deontay Johnson, the organization of a criminal enterprise, and obstruction of justice compounded his original crimes. When the final gavel fell, Elliot Lion Miller's fate was sealed. His sentence was upgraded to life imprisonment without parole. He had tried to claw his way to the top of the prison hierarchy, only to find the trap had been sprung by the one man he thought he had successfully eliminated. The justice was sharp, complete, and resounding. The integrity of the police force was restored. The Lion Gang was effectively dismantled, and Deontay's survival had ensured a clean sweep. But the story wasn't quite finished. There remained one final, dark irony waiting in the wings for the man who sold his badge for dirty money. Officer William Blackwood's future was sealed, and the nature of his punishment was about to come full circle. The final act of justice was sealed not with a handshake and a medal for Deontay, but with the cold, unyielding mechanics of the correctional system. Officer William Blackwood, stripped of his rank, his pension, and his freedom, was convicted on multiple counts of corruption, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. His sentence was steep, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The ultimate, devastating irony arrived a few months later. Due to security protocols and administrative convenience, William Blackwood was sentenced to serve his time in the very same maximum security penitentiary where the remnants of the Lion Gang, including the permanently incarcerated Elliot Lion Miller, were housed. His arrival was the moment the prison's internal ecosystem recalibrated. Blackwood was no longer an officer or a mole. He was a traitor. He had sold out their secrets, guaranteed their life sentences, and worst of all, he had failed to uphold his end of the bargain. In the brutal, unforgiving economy of the prison, failure was an unforgivable sin, and selling out a brotherhood was punishable by death. Elliot Miller, now facing the solitude of life without parole, watched Blackwood's procession through the intake facility. The rage that had boiled inside him when he thought Deontay was a mere cop had transformed into a cold, focused hatred for the man who had promised protection but delivered ruin. Blackwood was not just a symbol of the system that had trapped them. He was the final, vulnerable scapegoat. The retribution was swift, silent, and entirely predictable. Within 3 days of his arrival, William Blackwood was found in a maintenance corridor, brutally killed. No one saw anything. No one spoke a word. The prison had delivered its own final judgment, a brutal form of closure that bypassed the courts and the appeals process entirely. Deontay Johnson, having fully recovered from his wounds, watched the outcome from the outside, his mission fully realized. He had set out to find the corrupt cop, and by forcing the confrontation inside the prison, he had engineered a chain of events that resulted in the complete removal of the gang's external protection, Blackwood, and the permanent incapacitation of its internal leadership, Elliot Miller. He achieved justice not through physical dominance, like the kung fu instructor, but through the rigorous application of intelligence, sacrifice, and strategic risk. The attempt on his life had been the necessary catalyst, turning a covert investigation into a decisive victory against corruption. Deontay's scars were the final, painful evidence of his success. Dear viewers, so, what do you think? Did investigator Deontay Johnson get the justice he deserved? And did Officer William Blackwood face the ultimate consequence for his betrayal? Could you risk your life, your identity, and endure 5 deep stab wounds for the integrity of your badge? What makes a true cop? Fighting corruption from the outside, or enduring the deepest forms of betrayal to tear it out from the roots? Drop a comment and let me know. And tell me, have you ever been someone's Deontay? The one who saw the cancer in the system and endured humiliation and violence to excise it? Or have you needed someone to see you that way? Past the prison uniform, past the fear, straight to the truth that only courage can uncover? We all need people who choose the truth, who stay when the stakes are lethal, who execute a flawless plan from a hospital bed because justice can't wait. If you loved this story about a veteran cop who faked his own death, about a gang leader who had his empire dissolved by the man he tried to murder, about a mole who returned to the very cage he helped create, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. I post new high-stakes espionage thrillers and stories of ultimate consequence every day, and you don't want to miss what happens next. Like this video if you want more stories about lethal strategy, about surviving betrayal, about cops who go deep undercover, and about complex justice that delivers the traitor to his true enemy. Your likes tell me you crave more stories about real accountability, dangerous, unforgiving, and strategically brilliant accountability. This is Blissful Stories, where justice is forged in silence, not signatures, where a single recovered manifest can shift fates, and where the best consequences begin when someone is brave enough to rise from the grave to finish the job. Until tomorrow, remember, you don't have to pull the trigger to win the war. Sometimes all it takes is one emergency signal, one feigned death, one whispered, "It's over." Be someone's truth. Answer the call of duty. Change the system.